Welcome back, guys. I got my cat who just jumped on my lap over here. He just won't. He will not leave me alone. Everywhere I go, he literally follows. Anywho, let's get back to this study. We've been doing the Louis Berkhoff summary of Christian doctrine, and we touched up on the first few lectures on the topic of religion, and we said that religion is an effect, if you will. It is something that that humans do, if you will, but only as a result of God first having revealed Himself to humanity. So we say that religion is possible only because God has first revealed Himself to humanity. We also mentioned the fact that in that revelation, God has revealed Himself in two ways. Well, not in two ways. God has revealed Himself in many ways. We are reminded of the text in Hebrews chapter 1, where the author says, "Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets." So God was revealing Himself in the Old Testament to the people through other men, through the prophets. And then the author of Hebrews continues to say, but in these last days, He has spoken to us through His Son, namely Jesus Christ. And so Jesus Christ is the ultimate revelation of God. To have seen Christ face to face is to have seen God incarnate. It's to have seen the deity having descended into this realm and dwelt with us. So, but we also understand that there's not just those two ways in which God revealed Himself. We know that chiefly He has revealed Himself through Jesus. But we also know that He has revealed Himself to us through the scriptures, through the Bible. And so what we were talking about last few videos was that one of the two words that we use to describe God's revelation or revelations is, we say that God has revealed Himself in nature, or what we would call general revelation. And when we talk about general revelation, that is a revelation of God that we say is in general, right? It gives us a general content of who God is. It doesn't give us an exhaustive understanding of who God is, but it does give us some clues about who He is. And not only about who He is, but obviously that He is. In other words, that He exists. And that general revelation, we say it is through a what we distinguished last time, was we said that God reveals Himself through nature. We call that mediate general revelation. And what that means is that it is a revelation from God that is mediated through something. And so last time we talked about general revelation, that God reveals Himself generally, and every person in this world receives that revelation through nature, and it is a mediated revelation. It is revealed through an avenue, and namely the stars and the sun and the moon and the trees and birds and yes, even the cat. But anyway, so besides immediate revelation, we also distinguish between immediate and what we would call immediate general revelation. And so what we mean by immediate, we are using the word in its etymology and its etymological sense, which we say means without a medium. And so we talked about that last time, where we said that God's revelation is not just mediated through creation, but it is also directly implanted into the human essence, if you will, and we call that the conscience, right? We have a sense of duty, a sense of oughtness, and every person in this world knows right from wrong. Like we have a conscience, and the word conscience simply means with knowledge. And so that's what the word conscience means. So that with knowledge of what? When we say we have a conscience, we are saying that we have knowledge of what? Coffee? Knowledge of books? Knowledge of how to use Google? No. When we talk about a conscience, we talk about an understanding and a knowing right from wrong. It's a moral aspect. And so everybody knows right from wrong. And so that is what we call immediate revelation, because this is how God reveals himself through, but directly to humanity. So with that being said, immediate and immediate revelation, we also talked about the fact that the atheists and the agnostics don't believe in revelation. We talked about that last video, and we said that atheists suspend the agnostics suspends judgment. Atheists flat out would deny that they can even know, or that there is a God, perhaps. And so we've already talked about that in the past. So retrace the videos and take a look at what was spoken about that topic. But here's where I left off last video. I'm going to read and then stop and then survey what Louis Berkhoff says concerning revelation. So let me go ahead and read. It says, atheists and agnostics, of course, do not believe in revelation. Pantheists sometimes speak of it, though there is really no place for it in their system of thought. And I'll come back in a little bit to explain what pantheism or a pantheist is. And then it says, and deists admit the revelation of God in nature, but deny the necessity, the reality, and even the possibility of any special revelation, such as we have in the scripture. And then he says this: we believe in both general and special revelation. Now, when he says general revelation in distinction to special revelation, we talked about that in the last few videos. Again, general revelation is the revelation of God whereby he reveals himself through nature. And then special revelation is a revelation from God where he reveals himself especially through, for example, the pages of scripture, or in a dream, for example, or in visions in the Old Testament, or in what we would call theophanies in the Old Testament, or even obviously chiefly through Christ himself, which is God's greatest special revelation, right? Because in Christ he has revealed himself, and we don't call that general revelation, we call that special revelation. So we're going to leave special revelation aside for now. We're not going to touch on that, but we are still focusing on general revelation. So let me say something about what Berkhoff is saying about pantheists and deists. Now, don't quote me on this. I'm going to grab some coffee, because Bustelo, that's always where it's at. So don't quote me on this, but I'm not really sure. I'm going to say this: history has a pattern of repeating itself, right? And usually what ends up happening is that, like, at a certain time, a particular view or a particular idea is espoused, right? And it becomes a new system, a philosophy, if you will, that dominates a particular era. For example, the 4th century, the 18th century. And so all of these different philosophies that in time has popped up, right? And then so like what ends up happening is usually when one philosophy pops up and it's dominating the scene, another one tries to come up and tries to dominate it and supplant it and want to kind of correct it. And they would say something like, oh, well, this is wrong. This is the real view. And sometimes it is right. Sometimes it is the correction of that. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times the new philosophy, right, instead of doing God justice, for example, it would actually mangle God even more. So far from it helping and being more truthful, if you will, than this other philosophy, what ends up happening is it actually takes the pendulum and it swings it the other way. So I love the analogy of the pendulum. So suppose that God is in the middle. And to have a correct view about God, we would have to think in the middle. Well, what happens is, as we try to find our way to understanding who God is, we can say stuff like, well, I think God is A, B, and C. And so what happens is the pendulum begins to swing this way when we begin to think of God in the wrong way. And so when we begin to say things about God that is wrong, the pendulum begins to swing this way, right? And it kind of stays there. Well, in one sense, like a philosophy can be way up here. Another person stands up and says, no, you're way out on left field, right? We need to get back to center field. And so we're going to make up a new doctrine, right, to come back to center field. And what ends up happening is instead of bashing left field and bringing that person back to center field, this person goes and go to right field, for example, and now they have a different philosophy. And so the pendulum tends to swing back and forth, and no justice is done to the truth of God. So that's a huge pattern in philosophy and theology and in any discipline for the most part. There's always these theories that tend to think that they're right, but in reality they're missing the point, or there's not a unanimous what's the word I'm looking for? It falls short of the real truth. So with that in mind, keep in mind the pendulum. And so what happened is, and don't quote me on this, I'm not sure if one of them came first, either deism or pantheism, but if I remember correctly, I think one of them did come out first as a form of a new ism that basically was saying, hey, like this is the worldview. And so let me just explain what they are. Pantheism is the teaching that if you look at the word and you dissect the word means pan means all, right? Let's see, what other words? We get the word pandemonium, for example. You heard the word pandemonium. And what does pandemonium means? Oh, it just means like demon. It comes from demon. Demonium comes from demon. And then pan means all. So it's all demonic. And so but the word pan literally means all. And then you add the word theism to it, which means God, right? So atheism would be no God, atheism, and then pantheism would be all is God. So the philosophy behind pantheism, and we're not going to get too deep into this, you guys can do a research on it. Pantheism, pantheism. And so it all the bottom line is that pantheism says that everything is God and God is everything. So that in reality, God is not anything in particular. And if he is something in particular, he is nothing in general. And if he's everything in general, then he's nothing in particular. And so there's this idea that, hey, everything is God. And a lot of I think the Eastern Hinduism and a lot of other religions would have a pantheistic view that basically everything is God. Mother Nature is a huge system of thought for pantheism, because there's this idea that you don't want to hurt the trees, for example. Don't do anything to hurt the trees, because somehow there's inherent inside the tree God or whatever, and so like everything is God and God is everything. So that's the philosophy in a nutshell, obviously. But in reality, what this view does is that it makes God, and here's the key word, it makes God immanent. And what we mean by immanent means close, like really, really close. So if the closer you get, right, you become immanent. You are close. And so what pantheism tends to do is that it takes away what we call the transcendence of God. We believe that God transcends, and what transcendence means is not where God lives. It's not a geographical description about God, but it is rather what we call an ontological description of God. It is, we say that God transcends the universe, that he is a higher order of being. That's why we say ontologically transcendent. It's not that he transcends the universe as far as like, because God is higher as far as like elevators or stairs, for example. We live on the 3rd floor and God lives on the 8th floor. Therefore, he transcends. That's not what we mean. When we talk about God's transcendence, we are saying that God is a higher order of being than anything in the created universe. And so we must distinguish or we must separate, if you will, to a certain degree, and never confuse God with the creation, because God stands above and higher than his creation. So that's his transcendence, and then his immanence would be how God would be too close. So what pantheism did is that it chucked out the transcendence of God, and it made God too close. In other words, God he is near, he's everywhere. And in fact, he's inside the pen. Everything is God, God is everything. Let me not overlabor that. So that ism as a worldview, pantheism, dominated, until someone comes along and says, well, wait a minute, we need to fix that. Someone needs to fix that, because the Bible does not teach that. The Bible teaches us not that God is immanent, but rather that he is transcendent, that he is above and beyond this terrestrial sphere. So what deism, or the deists, did was they came along and they tried to fix the problem, and instead of fixing the problem and bringing the pantheists back to theism, they ended up going to the other side of the field, and they basically said that God is transcendent. And what happened was, with their view of God, the immanence of God was chucked out the window. Because we believe that the Bible teaches us that God is not only transcendent, but that he is also immanent. That he is near, okay? It's not that God is above everything and then he stays aloof and he is unfamiliar and uninterested in his creation. No, we believe that God transcends for sure. But we also believe that he is near. And so the deists went over to the other side, and now you have pantheism on one side teaching that everything is God, and deism on the other side teaching that no, we can't equate God with anything in the universe, and God is too out there. And now these people began to teach that not only is God too out there, he's too high, too out of this creation, that you cannot pray to him. Don't ask anything, right? Don't even seek him, because you can't find him, because he's too out there. And so they made God, listen to the word, wholly other. That is to say, WHOLLY, entirely other than the creation. Now, what's wrong with that view? We believe that God is wholly other in one sense. But we also believe that God created us in his image, which we talked about before. We also believe that God is a God of, and here's a word, he is the God of providence. Which when we talk about providence, we're talking about a God who provides. And if you look at the word providence, it literally means, we get the word pro, right? Which means ahead, right? Or in front. And then we get the word video. That's where we get the word video from, which means to see, right? When you see a video, so we get pro video, and that's what provide means. It literally means to see ahead. And when we talk about the providence of God, we mean that God not only created the universe and stands above and beyond it, but that he actually is involved in his creation in such a way that he provides for it, he sustains it, he keeps it going. And so the imagery that is pictured with deism, right, is that God created the universe. He wound the clock, if you will, of the universe, right? And he just kept winding it and winding it, and then just basically let it go and let it run on its own. And then God chucked out. Almost akin to the movie Bruce Almighty, if you remember that movie, where it's like, you know, in this case, I think it was Morgan Freeman who was supposed to be the God character, and he basically tells Jim Carrey, hey, I'm out of here, I'm on a vacation, you know, you take over. And so, but that there's that sense in which God took a vacation or whatever, and God created, and he said, yeah, you know what, I'm out of here. And of course that analogy falls short, but you get the point, that God basically created, let it run on its own, and God is no longer involved. So here's the question. What's the proper view then of God? Is he immanent and not transcendent? Or is he transcendent and not immanent? Or is he both? Well, the Bible teaches us that he is both. The Bible teaches us that he is both transcendent and immanent. And let me give you one proof text. In fact, I'll give you two of them. But one of them we touched on last couple of videos. We focused on the book of Acts and chapter 17, where Paul basically confronts the Athenians and the Greek philosophers who were guilty of making up gods in their own mind. And here's what he said. In passing, because I'm running short on time, but in passing, I'm going to say this. We're going to see both his transcendence and his immanence at play here. Watch this. Paul says this. The God who made the world and everything in it. Here it is. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, there it is, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything. That's his transcendence. That's telling us that, listen, God doesn't need anything. He is out there, right? He does not live in man-made temples. Like, God dwells way above and beyond this sphere, right? And he is the Lord of heaven and earth. So that's his transcendence. He is out there. And then he says, God doesn't need anything, right? And watch this. It says, since he himself, here's the key word, gives life to all mankind. Life, breath, and everything. So there is already a hint of his immanence. Now, someone can look at this text and say, well, wait a minute. That just tells me that God is transcendent. Because yes, he's saying that God is out there, that God is the maker of heaven and earth. He's the Lord of it. He does not need anything. But he actually gave life to man, instilled it in them like a clock, and then basically let them run on their own. So far, this is only proving deism. But watch this. And it says, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all of the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. Watch this. That they should seek God. But if God is too out there, how can we seek him? How can humanity ever find him if he's too out there and too remote? The answer is that he can be found. The answer is that yes, thank you, Paul. He is definitely transcendent. He does not live in man-made temples. However, he can be sought. And now watch this. That they should seek God in the hope that they might feel their way toward him. Here it is. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. Now, that's it right there. He transcends and he's involved. He is remote, as the God of all creation, as as his magic and his majestic, awesome, you kind of run out of words to describe the beauty of God, right? He's out there, but yet he's close. And so let me close this video by saying this. Pantheism does no justice to the real view of God, nor deism. Here's my question. Where are you? Do you have a proper balance and a proper view of who God is? Is your God everything and involved in every single thing, and you are probably tempted to hack away at his transcendence? Maybe you make God too much like you, or too much like an elephant, or possibly too much like a tree. Maybe you're guilty of jettisoning, if you will, his transcendence. Or maybe you're the opposite, where you're saying to yourself, no. I believe that God is a beast, that he is a monster, that he transcends, that he is the self-sustained, self-sufficient. He is immutable. He is like, has life in himself. He is like omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, all of these things. And you begin to have a proper view about God's transcendence that is extremely praiseworthy. And then you say this, but I can't know him. God cannot be known because he's too out there. And so there, and by saying that, you lost the real God. So by way of encouragement, let's really find the true God. Definitely think about the transcendence of God and worship God for his transcendence. No doubt whatsoever. I happen to think that the transcendence of God rocks me and makes me want to worship him more, because he is unlike anything I've ever experienced before, because he is God and he is amazing. But then when I look at his immanence and the fact that this amazing, unbelievable God is pleased to dwell with us, rocks my world as well. And to think that he actually pitched his tent among us in the person of his son Jesus Christ is glorious beyond measure. Listen, it is glorious to think that the transcendent being, the transcendent deity, condescended to our level and stooped down to pursue us and to snatch us away from not only our sin, but from his own wrath, right? Because we are found in sin. And he deemed it, what's the word I'm looking for without jacking up God's character? But by his own mercy, he saw it fit to give us mercy. Not even sure if that makes sense. But he what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe it's time to end the video. But all that to say that, okay, God is merciful. God loves us. And God for sure shows us both his transcendence and his immanence. I hope you are blessed by this message. We're going to get into more of this stuff. We haven't even scratched the surface, and I'm looking forward to it. So I'll see you next time in the next video. And in the meantime, hit the subscribe button. I did make a new introduction in the video, if you guys saw it. Tell me what you think about it. And hey, it might be either too long, because I think it's a minute long, but I'm working on an outro right now. But if it's too long, or if it's too like cheesy or whatever, just write it down in the comments and say, hey, change it or whatever, or excuse me, give me some recommendation. But I think it's kind of cool. But anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. God bless. Have a good night.